Hello, welcome back to English 323 Literature of Hawaii. I am Mark Panic. We're going to take a little bit of a look at this very complicated document, a little bit just now as I explain, and then you'll be reading an excerpt of this, which you can find in the resources section on the course webpage. It is called Hawaii by the author James Michener, or more accurately, since it's spelled incorrectly without the Okina, you might pronounce it Hawaii. And we'll tell you a little bit about the author Michener. What he did was, like many white folks who became enamored with this place from the continental United States, he was stationed here, or I don't think he was stationed, he passed through here several times during World War II as he was stationed in various islands throughout the Pacific. During that time, he wrote a collection of short stories called Tales from the South Pacific, and that catapulted him to fame and fortune because it won him the Pulitzer Prize, and it was adapted into a Broadway musical called South Pacific. And this is where a lot of the sexualization of Pacific Islands and of Pacific Island cultures and lots of Pacific Island stereotypes were perpetuated and strengthened, and in that context. And it was a big hit, so he became famous enough to start a writing career. He saw that this was writing career, the early 50s, was coinciding with the advent of television, and what television did to literature was kind of destroyed mostly the market for short stories and shorter writing, and he felt that people would want to be reading big, thick books about different places around the world. And so he started writing books like this. And this one was his third book, and it follows the formula that he then used for, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 other books throughout his career. About the Caribbean, about the Western United States, about the space program, things like that. And what he does is what he did here, which is he starts with a place and he traces it all the way from the bottom of the ocean. So there's a story of the geologic building of Hawaii, which is actually, turns out to be inaccurate. And then he takes different characters from different places around the world and sees how they got there, how they came here. He starts in China in one of the story arcs, and there's an older woman who migrates to Hawaii and becomes a helper for the Kalapapa camp on Molokai, and gives birth to 4 young sons, the last of whom she names Hong Kong Key. This is one of the names that he comes up with back in the 50s for some Chinese character. We also have a character that comes from Japan. Of course, this character comes to Hawaii to work on the sugar plantations, and he's this very industrious type of character who in his spare time he's able to find a piece of scrap metal and turn it into a Japanese bath where he can collect money from each of the other workers to take a bath in this wonderful warm water after their long day out on the cane fields. The older Chinese woman, similarly industrious. There's rarely a page in this book where she's not out trying to sell extra vegetables in the streets of Honolulu, or to cultivate vegetables in her yard, or do laundry for the affluent haole folks who live in Honolulu. It's always this kind of rags to riches progress narrative that you have with these characters. Of course, we have the original indigenous folks are traced all the way from Tahiti to their arrival in this place. And who else do we have? Oh yeah, of course, how could we forget? You have the haole folks, mainly the missionaries and the whalers who came from the northeastern United States and came and brought Jesus and the idea of capitalism to this place. And of course, if we're going to have a rags to riches narrative with the older Chinese woman and with the Japanese sugar planter, Of course, you're going to have that with the merchants and the whalers and all the commerce that was created to, again, the progress narrative, build Hawaii into, or Hawaii into, what else happened in 1959? Into the 50th state. Now, as you'll see, this book began to take up all of the oxygen in the room when anything written about Hawaii came up to folks, particularly on the mainland. This was available in airports all around the world. This was read widely by millions and millions of people, and it became kind of, you know, it says it's well researched, but what is the research that's done? It's journals written by missionaries. It's things written by literary tourists that preceded him. It includes no indigenous scholarship. There are a lot of voices left out, as we'll see later, in the things that Michener consulted in order to create his story. Now, that falls into the category of maybe a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. And you'll see more of that as you read the one excerpt that you're going to be reading. The main conclusion of this progress narrative that was able, the folks who were able to take Hawaii from what looks like an uncivilized place into 20th century American capitalism as a happy ending kind of thing, is Michener's concept of this utopian idea of the Golden Man. And his definition of the Golden Man in the final chapters of this book is somebody who would be equally at home in the boardrooms of New York City as in the tea rooms of Tokyo, Japan, and is of some kind of mixed race and able to lead the world that is shrinking since the end of World War II into a more multicultural landscape where people are more comfortable interacting with folks who don't look like they do. Sounds like a great idea, okay? And the Golden Man, when we get to the final chapters of this book, the Golden Chinese Man is his character Hong Kong Ki. The Golden Japanese Man is the descendant of the guy who built the photo of the bath in the fields and was able to make money. His son was named Shigeo Sakagawa. Now, it's only the last couple of pages of his story that we see on page 1 of the excerpt that you'll find on your resources section. But Shigeo Sakagawa is able to become the Golden Man. Why? Because he participated in World War II and proved himself as worthy of being American. We'll talk a little more about how problematic that notion may be. And then, of course, the Golden Man from Tahiti turns into the Hawaiian character of Hawaiian ethnicity, Keli Kanakoa. And his little excerpt is mainly the part of Hawaii that we'll be reading for this class. There are a couple of things that you need to take note of as you're reading that. One is this Golden Man idea, which sounds so great, is in the end dependent upon, regardless of what the cultural backgrounds are of any of these characters, they need to do what Shigeo Sakagawa did, which is in the end prove that they have assimilated into being just what a white American would be. So the whole notion of this turns out to be extremely flawed and, in fact, dangerous in the claims that it half makes there. So you need to take note of that, but you also need to take note of course, if there's a passage set in 1940s and early 50s or late 40s Honolulu, which is where Keli Kanakoa's chapter is situated. It's going to include some of the local dialect, and of course we'll talk a little bit more about this, but most of you probably already know that we're talking about Pidgin, or Hawaiian Creole English as the linguists call it. There are some significant problems with Michener's depiction of how Pidgin is used by these characters that is completely at odds with the way that subsequent local writers were deploying this authentic local language. And the problems You'll see, of course, it isn't, good Pidgin. It's not what people sound like, but that's not even the half of it. Subsequent local writers, as you'll see, would use Pidgin as a way to express an authentic self. And in fact, a collective, non-white, resistant collective self in some cases. And if you go even further, maybe even as a different language itself that was unintelligible to the power structure in some cases, not all. It's used in here by this guy in Hawaii, not to express an authentic self, but to hide an authentic self behind a kind of minstrel dialect that's meant to impress the tourists. Okay, that's it. That's Hawaii by James Michener.